Awesome. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today and a very good evening to everyone. Welcome to the International Women's Day event, which is being hosted by Incremental Learning and Consulting. I am Kokil Gupta, for those of you who don't know me, and I will be co-hosting today's event with Harshita Rajashekar. International Women's Day is celebrated around the world on the 8th of March, and it has been going on for over a century actually, with the first gathering held in 1911, a long, long time ago. And it is actually celebrated every year to achieve, to celebrate women's achievements in the social, economic, cultural, and political areas. The idea is to raise awareness and to call to action for accelerating gender parity. This day is a reminder for all of us that this is not solely a woman's issue. In the recent years, men have also been recognized as major advocates and champions of change in the quest for women empowerment and in also promoting women's equality that challenges stereotypes and biases. And that together we are responsible for enabling a progressive mindset that fosters gender parity and co-creates a culture and an environment that promotes inclusivity, not just in our workplaces, but also in our day-to-day lives. We at Incremental are celebrating women's contribution in leadership. This topic has been very close to all of us involved in incremental learning and consulting. So it was quite natural for all of us, a group of agile enthusiasts like us to host such an event. This year's campaign theme for International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. A challenged world is an alert world, and from challenge comes change. So let's all choose to challenge. So keeping this in mind, today's discussion is focused on how leadership has been challenged in the times of COVID-19 pandemic. What had to be changed from mindset, culture, and practices perspective to empower women leaders and promote gender equality. Recognizing the fact that men are an integral part of this journey, we are delighted to have amongst us not only two inspirational women leaders, but also highly regarded men leaders. We have here with us Dr. Louise Mahler, Isabel Wu, Craig Brown, and Jason Cameron, who would be gracing us on the panel today. So thank you for joining, everyone. I'll now hand over to Harshita to introduce our esteemed panelists. Thanks, Harshita.
Thank you, Kokil. Let's start with Dr. Louise Meller. Louise is a global thought leader on the psychology of voice and body language for leaders. You may wonder how that all began with an economics degree majoring in statistics. It could be an interim decade of singing opera in Europe with some really great voices, or as a soloist contract at Vienna State Opera, where you learn a thing or two about that adage: perform or get kicked off the stage. However, it was a master's in organizational psychology and a PhD in business that brought it all together, combined with the practical experience of coaching some of the most challenging federal politicians, heads of international business, police commissioners, and rising corporate talent. Louise makes regular TV appearances and is a constant feature for comment on radio, and in 2020 won an International Stevie Award for helping women in business. Please welcome Dr. Louise.
Hello, thank you. What would you like me to do now, Harshita?
I'm going to introduce Isabel and we'll go ahead. Thank you. Our second panelist is Isabel Wu. Isabel is founder and director of Meta Management, a business consultancy that helps organizations and their people to develop the digital capabilities that increasingly determine success in business and work. She is the author of Michelangelo Project, a 2020 bestseller on the future of work. Please welcome Isabel.
Okay.
Our next panelist is Jason Cameron. Like many of us, Jason grew up in the project world using PMBOK competencies. Jason has managed a national PMO for telco. He fell in love with Agile, in particularly Scrum. Jason is on a mission to demystify Agile at scale and help the wider community to adopt and grow. Jason enjoys going on long walks on the beach. Before starting in the project world, he used to be a sound engineer. Today, Jason is an enterprise Agile coach, a mentor, trainer, and a facilitator. Please welcome Jason Cameron. Our final panelist is Craig Brown. Craig is a co-founder and CEO of Everest Engineering, one of the Australia's fastest growing software development agencies, and is an early adopter of Agile methods and practices. He is also the co-founder of The Last Conference in Australia. He thinks putting staff first is a sensible and obvious thing. Craig is passionate about building a community of practitioners. Please welcome Craig Brown. Thank you so much. Now I hand back to Kokil to kickstart the discussion.
Thank you, Harshita. That was amazing. Welcome, everyone, once again. And it's now time for us to kick off our discussion for the evening. However, before we get right into our panel discussion, I'd like to mention a few points. We have allocated 40 minutes for our discussion today with our panelists. Harshita and I will be moderating the conversations. Audiences are welcome to share their questions via Zoom chat. We will be monitoring the chat and will endeavor to present questions from our audiences as time permits. To ensure minimal disruption during our discussion, I will request all the audiences to stay on mute, except our panelists, of course. We will open the floor for audience Q&A after the discussion. So great, let's get started. 2020 has been a year of major learning for all of us, in fact, and shifting the way we think and do many things. For leaders at all levels, COVID-19 has presented a crisis unlike any other in recent times, and it has forced everyone to pivot and adapt very quickly. So starting on our today's theme, I'm actually very curious to learn from our esteemed panelists about your experience in dealing with COVID last year, how it has impacted your leadership style, and what are some of the practices you had to adopt?
Start with Louise.
Yes, Louise, would you like to share your experience and learnings with us, please?
Yes, so what I do is I speak, I train, and I coach. And basically, my life fell through the day that COVID hit. You know, I'd just come back from America speaking for Adobe. I was in Sydney. I had a keynote on the Friday, the Saturday, and just bang, go home. That's it. It was all finished. And that was very challenging. And I have to say, 2020, I've never worked so hard in my life. You know, and really, if it's, you know, I have this phrase, if it's going to be, it's up to me. And I looked at what other people were doing, and I found that a lot of people froze. They just froze. They did nothing. They didn't know what to do. And I went, well, that's not what I'm going to do. So I did a very different approach of doing a lot of social media, a lot of free webinars, a lot of just getting out, because I had this real need. People needed help. And I'm like, hang on, I've got the tools to help. So, you know, getting out there and doing that. So it had a dramatic impact on me and really changed what I do and the energy level.
Wonderful. That's amazing, Louise. I think it was a very tough year for everyone around the world, actually. So thanks for sharing your views and your learnings, Louise. Isabel, would you like to share yours?
Of course, thank you. I actually have quite an opposite experience because, well, I've worked remotely and virtually for quite some time, so and flexibly, so that didn't feel very different. And as it turned out, a lot of the clients that I worked with had a bumper time. So toys, hobbies, food, community services. So quite a few of the people that I was working with, actually what we ended up doing quite often was saying, look, you know, this sounds terrible, but we're having a really good time this year. We're having a really good year this year. So it was a very apologetic and almost guilty way of acknowledging how their business was going. And in a way, there was a lot of that was great. So not only good that there were companies doing so well, but I think it brought out a lot of humility in people, because you wouldn't wind back a year, business leaders didn't usually apologize for doing well. And the sense that of inequality was something that was, I think, a lot more prevalent this and last year than I've ever seen it.
Mm. Right. I'm actually quite keen to know, in what way did you find that the equality actually was much more prevalent last year than any other year?
Not the equality itself, it wasn't, of course. In fact, in many respects, it went backwards. But a sensibleness or sensitivity about the fortunes of some was more acknowledged than I'm used to seeing. So normally it's, you know, you get everything from, you know, cutthroat, which probably not people I tend to work with, but, you know, there is a sense that business should be competitive. And that's not, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I don't think business should be as competitive as we make it out to be. You know, there are lots of there's a lot of evidence that say cooperative and collaborative business actually do better than industries that are highly competitive.
That's true. Absolutely. What are your thoughts, Craig?
I'm just taking a note from what you just said there, Isabel. I'm going to add that to my points. So where we were in mid-March last year is 1 year and 12 weeks in business, brand new company. We've been fairly successful with our operation in our first year, and we had a really strong sales pipeline, and we'd employed 72 people at the time that COVID kind of slipped into us, right? And at that time, all of our sales pipeline went to zero, right? So, you know, 22 of those people were kind of hired to work in things that we knew were going to happen, but all of a sudden weren't. About half of our customers turned around to us and said, we think we want to terminate within the next month, right? So that was going to break us. So there was like multiple things that we had to pay attention to at that particular time. One was the staff experience, and the other was the cash flow to ensure that we still had staff to have an experience, right? So we, the founders of the business, had a conversation about what our priorities were, and we decided our first priority was to maintain jobs as much as we can, and we would do whatever it took to try to make sure that nobody lost their job. We didn't know how long the COVID thing was going to happen. None of us knew in March. It's like, is it going to be a month? Is it going to be 3 months? No one imagined it was going to be 2 years, right? But so that was our first thing. And so there was a hustle, right? Me and the guys that were doing sales just rang all our customers, and, we cut our rates, and we went to cost only to sustain jobs and all that sort of stuff. And because of the nature of relationships we had with our customers, if they had cash, they stuck by us, and we kind of came to these mutual things where it hurt us. Like, so, we still would be on a growth trajectory, but we kind of have no cash flow to grow up until maybe about now or maybe next month. So that was a big deal for us. The next part of it was 70 staff, right? They're all going, what the hell's happening? Now, we were always kind of flexible with remote. We all, work on SaaS software products, and, Slack and, GitHub and tools like that are the things that people use, right? But still, most people were coming to the office most of the time. And so there was, all of a sudden, there was this isolation stuff that was going on. So Ranganathan, who manages the team in India, he introduced every day at about 4:30 in the afternoon in India, he would just get people to, 50 odd people come together on video conference. and there'd be like somebody would teach people how to do watercolors, or somebody would sing a song, like, and then they'd have like singing or guitar lessons, or things like that were really kind of human and connecty. And that went on a not like there was a big event once a week, and then kind of smaller things the other days. And I remember one particular time really early, it was probably late March, karaoke. They were doing karaoke. So me and the other Australians, including my wife and child, got on the call at like 8 o'clock at night, and all these people were murdering these songs, and it was so horrible. And we did the same thing. We just sang horribly. So it was fun. But so the first bit was like, there was a shock to the system and we had to deal with it, and I'll just make my point and shut up so I don't use too much time. The next thing was we kind of had to get a framework for how we're going to talk about this. So Ranganathan came up again, he did the hard work, right? He came up with this idea of like, there's 3 stages. There's like respond to the shock to the system. There's a repair stage where we kind of like do what we need to get ourselves back into a stable position. And then there's the restore, which is like gradually grow back to a thriving organization. And he laid that out, and then we started doing monthly all hands, which we hadn't done up until that point. And then we just kind of, there's an open thing. We did this really, one last thing I want to share about it. We did this really nice thing, which is, I don't know how it emerged, but it emerged out of the crowd, right? So, we do these monthly all hands, and there's 70 odd people on them. Does anyone, like, I think I asked the question, right? Does anyone want to thank anything for anything from this last week, right? And then it just turned into this, you think it's going to be really awkward, right? It's like 40 minutes of people like appreciating each other on a monthly basis. And so we've taken this all hands town hall type meeting. We've crowded all the business part into the first 15 minutes. And then the next 30, 40 minutes is like people telling stories about the good work and the things that people have done to help each other. And that's now kind of a norm in our organization, which is cool, right? So that was exciting. And so that connectivity, right, was the big deal, right? And I think, and I can spill into heaps about remote working, but I'll stop at that point.
Well, that was amazing, Craig. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned that was, everyone had to really pivot, how they were working in the past. And COVID has been a shock to everybody. It was completely unplanned. No one was expecting it. And everyone was, taken by, a huge surprise. So the company that I was actually working with last year, they also had these really nice sort of, interactive sessions to make sure that everyone is being supported and looked after. Being isolated at home, having to, just sort of balance your home as well as work, 24/7. It was quite challenging. So it's really great to hear that, companies have actually adopted. And one of the things that you mentioned was very aligned to the change curve. When we are hit by a shocking event, we go through those emotions, and how you and your company has created that sense of humanizing the entire experience for your work members was amazing. Thanks, Craig. Over to you, Jason. Would love to hear from you, your experience in your learning.
Yeah, sure. I, like many other people, learned how to pivot quickly. So for us, and in the organisation that I was working for at the time, we were in a cadence of working where we had big room planning over a 2-day period, once a quarter, to plan out the next quarter. And that was very much a face-to-face type of event. Then the 18th of March fell upon us, as it was for this organisation anyway, on the day that everyone was told, you need to now work from home, or you need to go home until we work out what we're doing, or whatever the case might be. And other different organisations probably worked through that particular problem differently. But what I found was that there was an extraordinary resilience from within the teams that we were definitely working with. And I found that the teams that had been working in an agile way were able to consume that change pretty rapidly. They'd had to already face the challenges of remote working and things like that in the past, and finding solutions for that. I guess what that meant from an 18th of March perspective was, with big room planning looming in 2 weeks' time was changing a face-to-face event to a remote event for 200 people. And team really pulled it together, like in terms of providing a format and a framework to follow, provided the tools and prepared people as best as possible. There was this undertone of empathy and flexibility that I think a lot of people recognize that we're all going to have to face and leverage moving forward. And so, you know, these times meant that there was a little bit more uncertainty, and that, you know, some of the, I guess, more of the way of working type elements were less of a priority than it was on the human side. You know, the family connection, coming together as families and working out what it meant for the home space. I think one of the questions earlier up was around how have you changed as a leader, or what practices you may have adopted. I'm currently going through recruitment, and with the recruitment drive that's on at the moment, we're very much open to a work from anywhere approach. You know, we've had to follow that sort of a plan for some time, and I guess what that's probably done is prove that it can work, and to allow people to move past mental models where the risk around remote working is a little bit of a myth, and that having that empathy and building trust and that sort of thing is definitely more important to attracting the right sort of people to your organization as well. And so, yeah, I find that things like working from home, finding new ways of collaborating and facilitating and things like that in a remote sense, I think it opened up the world, to be honest. From an opportunity point of view, I think, you know, for people who are involved in communities such as this one, time zones became less of a problem. And sort of reaching out or branching out to different time zones allowed people to experiment with different concepts that they may not have had access to before, because either the skill set belonged somewhere else or lived somewhere else.
Everyone remote out, doesn't it, Jason?
Sorry, what?
When everyone's remote, it levels it out. There's not like a power group and a bunch
That's
of...
right.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, networking became different to us. And so many people I know scored so many certifications in the last year, it's not funny, because opportunities became available to them, right? I think one of the key learnings amongst all of this was make capacity to be kind to yourself and the people around you. Because really, people are at the core of everything we do. And regardless of what we choose to do with what's next and choose what challenge we face, thinking about it from an International Women's Day perspective, we need people, regardless of gender. You know, find your quiet space, find time to have breaks, find time to make connections with people that you would normally have coffee with, because you may not have that interaction all the time as it may have been in the past. And I find, yeah, people need to make the time to create that work-life balance, you know, in a remote sense as well.
Absolutely, Jason. Thanks for that. Yes, Harshita, sorry.
No problem. Thanks, Jason. Following on that one, I think from past 1 year or so, we have seen that the work culture has changed, and people see projects in a different point of view because they're within their home environment and not at the workplace. So it has been a challenge for the leadership. So according to you, what is the biggest challenge that leaders face today in the virtual world? Or is it separate for, is it something different only for women, or it is the same for men and women, irrespective of the gender? So I'll start with Craig. So what do you feel that the biggest challenge that leaders face today?
I've been working with remote teams for a real long time, and like I've always, like not always, but like for a long time, I've also been in a leadership role across teams in many countries, right? So I remember there was a time when I used to have to manage, I stacked up a bunch of meetings in one day, and I'd start my first meeting with a guy in Denver at 6 a.m. And then I'd talk to people in California early in the morning, and then Australians during the day, and then Indians, and then French people, and then English people and German people. And it was just a really long day. It was 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. was that day. And the people on those teams generally liked my contribution because my focus was on relationships over transactions. So yes, they needed to talk about their work and reflect on it and all that sort of stuff. But where they really found value in my contribution was connecting people and helping people understand each other and brokering shared agendas and stuff like that. You know, your experience with me tonight is just going to give you a signal of like my weak spot is I talk too much. So I'll dominate conversations unless I guard myself. But you know, of course, listening skills are really important. And you know, Ruma and I've known each other for years, and she'll laugh because I think she's one of the best listeners I've ever come across. But you know, and she's great when you pair her up with me because I do all the talking and she just sits there and listens. But I find if I do find time to shut up and pay attention to it, there's always something that I get out of that conversation. And the same is true for everyone, right? So whenever you're talking to people and interacting with them, there's always something you can learn from them. So this is like the remote working and leadership stuff in the context, right? And teams, there's another interesting aspect, which I'm kind of mulling over at the moment, which is we have these organizational identities, and I feel like your team is probably the dominant one, not the organization, not the relationship with the customer. It's like the handful of people you work with on a day-to-day basis. Again, back to the context of this meetup and Jason's point is agile teams have kind of already spent many years kind of focusing on team dynamics and focusing on performance as a team. I've for many years just lived outside of the team and across multiple teams. So yeah, there's a thing about me subordinating my need to get everyone on my agenda and respecting the fact that people need to have a team identity and a team relationship, and that's a social construct, and you know, all that stuff goes on in that container. You know, everyone's going to talk about work-life balance. They're the key things, right? Yeah, there you go.
Great, Craig. As you speak, I'm wondering that how many hours you're going to sleep. That's what I was counting. And I do.
You do that for periods of time and you try to contain it and all that sort of stuff. Generally, you need to maintain sustainable hours.
Oh, I do agree on.
It also helps to have jobs you really like, because then you just want to go to work, right?
That's right.
And of course, jobs you really like is made up of people you really like.
100%. I do agree on the fact of active listening as leaders is one of the key skills to have. Moving on to Louise. What do you think, Louise, according to you, is the biggest challenge that leaders face today?
Well, I'm a bit like, you know, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And, you know, my work is being heard. And for me, the biggest challenge is for people to be heard. And I'm not alone in that. You know, people are saying they can't be heard or be noticed. And it's one of the reasons people want to go back to work, because, you know, they want to be seen and recognized and heard. And I certainly have it's working with people where I had a man who ran a board and he said, oh, yes, we have a woman on our board and we've been virtual now for 3 months. He said, I don't think she's spoken. Now, and I immediately go, well, there can be issues here about her speaking up. But for him as chair, did he not stop for a second and go, hang on a minute, we haven't heard from you, you know, Joan. So, you know, on both sides, there are issues with people being heard. Now, in this environment, in the virtual environment, let me tell you that voice has raised in importance. And I listened to Jason, you know, and Craig, and it's both, you know, it's down there, it's just I'm talking like this, and then suddenly Jason might go, oh, Louise, I think and everyone go, Jason, where's Jason? Because we love low voices for leadership and strength. So as a woman, my voice is higher. I am what's called pushing shit uphill. And, you know, how do we manage that? How do we do it? How do we get heard? Voices become, but we're not doing it well. I have sat through meetings in organizations where people have presented for, say, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, doing what's called vocal fry. Vocal fry is where you have no air coming out of your body and you say, vocal fry. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is we're actually doing that goes on for 25 minutes. I mean, I'm just tearing my hair out. Or really common is up talk. So I think one of the critical things we need to do, is to look at the project, and one that would be really great. And everything goes up at the end. And this is massively weakening, you know, in what you do. Or maybe because of a visual preference in a lot of you in the world, be visual, you know, so your eyes will go up, your voice will go up. I mean, my voice is high, but wow, you know, I mean, you know, we can go into Minnie Mouse. And we just haven't been aware of this stuff. And it's like cruelty to dumb animals, as we weren't very good at it before. Now we're thrown into this virtual world and it's magnified. And I really have seen women really struggle to be heard. And if they are being heard, nobody's listening. One of the key things I've had to do is teach listening skills, and for people to be able to get some movement, nod, 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 blink, and smile. Nod, blink, and smile. That's how you listen, team. Nod, blink, smile. Yeah, go like this into the screen, which is what I see most of the day. So, you know, and this morning, crap, got this. As a woman rang me and she said, I'd love to, she's the CEO of an Australian organization, but she'd like to be on the international team, executive team. And she's saying to me, you know, I think that one of the things I'd like to do with the executive, and, you know, and I'm going, oh, this is not working for me, darling. You know, which part of you actually have to look professional don't people get? You know, and if I can't see you, if you're in the dark, you know, I'm going to lose trust. I'm going to lose trust. And so one of the biggest challenges is, to summarize that, is that people have not taken the environment seriously. They haven't set up their background. They haven't got the right mics. They haven't got lighting. And they've got no idea what to do in this space or how to sound. And virtual, we may be going back to some face-to-face, some hybrid, but this will always be part of our lives, and it's time to manage it professionally.
Thank you so much, Louise. Just got to say you're a visual treat to watch, trust me. And I do.
Throw in a bit of pink, baby, that'll do it.
Actually, we have a really good question from one of our audiences here, Jyoti. It's a very interesting sort of question you've posed on the chat. Would you like to ask that question to Louise?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, so as you can see, Louise, I have a virtual background going. So some of the times you won't be able to see something. So I'm always struggling that, what about the virtual preference? Now, I know some people are doing the green screen, so you can see it. But do you think as a leader that makes me look, that doesn't deliver the impact that I want to deliver? Like, what is the preference? What is the norm on virtual background?
I can't tell you how many toilets I have seen in people's backgrounds. Or people go, oh, it's beautiful. You know, we're getting into everybody's bedroom. I don't want to be in your bedroom. I do not want to be in your bedroom. I find it embarrassing, quite frankly. So, you know, get rid of the bed. And, you know, and then people go, no, green screen. Yeah, no, green screen. You need no green screen. It's an alternative. You know, I have a green screen behind me. I can whack that up at any time or put it down. And, you know, it depends on the time of day, who's there. I want that flexibility. And your background is your brand. And if your brand says toilet, you know, what are you thinking? And so the classic would be there, Isabel, a bookcase, you know, and to have interesting bookcase, a live plant, and then something that, talking about building relationships, because we're not in person. How do you build relationships? So you want something in your background that you can talk about. So see, Yoti, there, I can't really see your books. I can't see, you know, I want to be able, if you fish or, you know, ride horses or something, it's great to have a big picture of you riding a horse, because this is a conversation topic. you know, and I can say, oh, Isabel, do you ride horses? You know, did you write that book? And then you can say, oh, yes, I do.
I did.
Wow. And you know, you're right there. So your background is your brand, but it needs to have something there that are talking points that gives us something to talk about. And Yoti, I would use green screen, but if you've got green screen, you really do need a background, but you really do need a green screen, because otherwise you get that bleed, you know, on the hair, and I don't think that works. I've got backgrounds like your room there that people go, oh, I didn't know, you know, you had a piano. Oh, I don't. It's a green screen. But they couldn't tell. They couldn't tell. So green screen, no green screen, doesn't matter, but it's your brand and it's your way of building relationships to have something there that's a talking point. And see, Isabel says neat. I see a lot of people have bookcases that just look like they're hoarders. And it's not a good look. It's not a good look. The other thing is, see, Jason, I don't want to see your ceiling. You know, that ceiling. that is eye level, mate, because if you're standing above, you start to get that Joker look, you know, like, I'm going to kill you. And if you're standing below, you get that, I'm so arrogant. I'm just so arrogant. So, you know, bang, straight in, eye level. That's really important for the messages you send, you know.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you so much.
That was amazing.
I could talk all day, of course.
Moving on with Isabel, is actually what Louise was making a point. Last year in June, July, I was attending a virtual leadership conference hosted in India, and they said not to have a green screen and being vulnerable and not to come across professional. And this is the time to show a true self. Like if your kid is shouting in the background, that's you. And this is the opportunity for us to be ourselves. But when I hear Louise, and I'm like, oh, there is a point there as well. What's your take on that one, Isabel? Is this the COVID world has given us an opportunity to show our true self and being vulnerable, or should we need to be professional? What's your take on that, Isabel?
I think it's really, it says a lot about our way of thinking that we see this idea of an answer that way. You know, my bookshelf is actually filled with books that I have read, and they're my favorite books for all various reasons. And, you know, you can, if you look closely enough, yes, you do see the book that I did write, but there's also very Asian flavor, because of course that comes from my background. So I agree with Louise that it is important that when you bring yourself to work, you bring a full self, a whole self.
Your best self. Your best self, you know, and children are part of that. So children come in, animals, that's okay, but not the toilet.
Yeah, not that much of yourself. But then again, that's not everyone. And there have been a lot of very contrived backgrounds in the last 12 months that we've seen people filling their shelves with books that, you know, that they would like everyone to think that they're very knowledgeable and intellectual about. And that, so you think you have to be careful about rules. And when it comes to women, I think we also have to apply that thinking to how women approach the way they work. I mean, if women have a history of being told what they should or shouldn't do, if you go back a century or more, they should be quiet, they should be seen, not heard, they should be modest, they should be subservient, and they should be sensitive to the needs of everyone around them, and they should be looking after their parents. They should. I mean, women have been told how to follow rules for generations. Then as we get into the workplace, and as women are starting to come through the ranks more successfully, all we've done is shift some of the rules, and we're now telling people that they should aspire to leadership. And I, for one, would love to see the end of International Women's Day, for example. I'd like one day to be telling people, children who come after us, oh, did you know we used to have International Women's Day? And for them to say, really, what for? You know, why not?
Sure.
You know, and I'd like to see that we look at leadership in a way other than traits, behaviors, and aspirations, because we should not have to be told how we should be. And if you think, you know, women are often told, or girls are told, be more assertive, be more this, be more that, so that you too can be one of these leaders. And then if you look at what they're aspiring to be, it's actually to be like men. And then you look at how a lot of men have been in the last few months, and quite a few that I've spoken to have said, we love lockdown or working from home. We've actually been able to take our kids to school. We actually know what our children do at this time of day. One of them actually said to me, I actually know what my kids eat now. And women are saying, so this is our life. We've always been throwing the cat off the table and putting on a scarf to hide the food stain that the 3-year-old left there, and working our meetings around the traffic that we know that we have to deal with at school pickup time. That's been the life of many, many women for a long time, and far more than men. So you're pulling all that together. I think we've had this wonderful balancing in many cases where men are starting to discover that we shouldn't have to talk about work-life balance. There's just people, family, priorities, things.
What's wrong with them?
And that women should be able to aspire to a career that doesn't include being told to follow which rules in order to be a certain way, and which the standard often is set by our expectations of success, which is often set by our comparison to male behaviours traits.
We're recreating the rules, but at the same time, we're constantly having to balance what are the perceptions, because it's the perceptions that make the rules. And now what do we want to recreate? So for instance, in voice, the perception of leadership is a low voice. There's nothing we can do about that. And yet people have in the past, they pandered to that as the rule, and they've taken the voice low. Well, you know, in Australia today, we just say, you sound ridiculous. You know, so it's not, we have to recreate what is real by saying, what is my real voice? Where do I sit there? I don't want to go higher than it already is because of this perception issue. So I'm aware of the old rules, recreating the new rules, and kind of new world maybe, and just balancing and recreating. We're creating a new world of leadership.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Louise and Isabel. Louise, I know a kid in the background is okay, but not toilets are not okay in the background. I made that point. That's clear now. I think, Jason, I'm not sure what you're going to do magic with your voice now.
Can I say something else though, is that you have to realize, someone mentioned in there in the comments about, you know, rapport. If you have rapport with the group, you can do whatever you like. You pick your nose, sit on the toilet, you know, you've got friends. I bet you've got friends, you go to the toilet and you go, yeah, I'm just on the toilet. You know, I mean, I do, quite frankly, but, you know, I wouldn't do that with a client. So the rules change.
I wonder how much gender influences, or I wonder how much gender biases get in the way of you being as authentic as you want to be. Like, I mean, I play hard on just being the authentic me pretty well, but I get away with it. But I wonder what it's like for you guys, or women, not guys.
Oh, Craig, you only have to watch Married at First Sight to see, you know, how that works. You know, any louder woman or woman with personality, you know, I say, when things are bad, I say, well, at least I'm not being burnt at the stake, because in any other sector I would have been burnt at the stake, you know. So not being burnt at the stake, we're on the up. But yeah, it's hard.
And then does that go to the point of, like, you know, you need alliances and support, right, to open those opportunities up? You can't do it by yourself.
It's different in different professions. So I find I love working, you know, in cyber and digital, because they are much more balanced. But you go to finance, financial planning, you know, these areas, law, different rules.
Cool. Thanks, Louise and Craig. Jason, bringing back to you, what's the biggest challenge do you think that the leaders face today in the COVID or the virtual world, or is it anything different for women in particular? What's your take on it, Jason?
I feel like I've actually learned a bit through this conversation, to be honest, and I'd like to perhaps maybe just explore something a little bit further as well. Being your authentic self, I think it works for some people, but not necessarily for other people. And, you know, some people find that that's a natural ability and feel quite comfortable in one's own skin, I guess. I think regardless of being in a COVID environment, I've found that to be really important anyway. So I don't feel like COVID's made a big impact on that. That wasn't really exploring, was it? But the other thing that I was going to raise as well was something that I heard a little bit earlier. And that was, you know, from, you know, in an International Women's Day and from a woman's perspective, do we feel that equality has taken a step backwards? Has it remained stable? For myself, from a leadership perspective, don't feel that I hold those biases, but I wonder, you know, is there a subconscious level that I need to be conscious of, or more conscious of? And
Jason, I'll say, yeah, there is, because I see it in myself on a regular basis.
Yeah, right. Okay, interesting. So yeah,
I see it in myself. I've done it just recently where there was a woman and I said, "How do you enjoy nursing?" And she said, "I'm the doctor."
That's right.
You know,
Really, really deep. Sorry, interrupt you, Jason. Like, I want to invite you to kick off again, but if you don't, I'm going to inject a story.
Go for it. Go for it. I've got a story that can follow afterwards, so we'll balance out.
On the topic of gender biases, right, and our blindness to them. Today, I was talking to a software team that are building a leave tracking app, right? And they're in India and they're addressing the Indian market. And they're working away at building this tool. And what they've done in the work so far is they've asked people to, you know, put a comment in about why they're taking leave, and they think they're going to publish that, right? And it's like, do you not realize, like, there's women software developers on the team. And I just asked the people that are kind of the leaders, which are men, like, do you guys realize that you guys all get this, right, guys? I got to break that habit. But you realize that people don't want to necessarily express why they're on leave. And they're all like, everyone does. I kind of described the domestic violence or a mental health problem, right? And it's the people that are vulnerable and the people that don't have the power that are going to be having these problems. And they're also, not exclusively, but they do. But also, when you ask a crowd of people, what do you think about this? They're also the same people that aren't going to speak up, right? And what was really, really interesting to me is, like, the three guys on the team are like, oh, really? I didn't think of that. And the four women on the team are like, yep, they're all nodding emphatically, just going, that's exactly right. And that's my experience. I don't feel like I can express myself. And the guys are just blind and oblivious to this bias that's in the conversation. So that's
used to not being heard, and therefore, you know, it just becomes a pattern.
I'd like to add to that as well and say that I think that it's fantastic when leaders don't have, you know, an issue in engaging with equity. But I think where it becomes dangerous with leadership, and I do still see that, you know, in a variety of organisations, is where leaders then adopt almost a kind of homogenous mindset where they think, well, I don't have an issue with it, and therefore they don't ask those probing questions to understand where perhaps that's endemic elsewhere in the organisation. So, you know, perhaps personal ownership is taken of that, but then there isn't enough scrutiny and deep diving into how widespread that is across organisations.
Thank you, Suzanne. Jason, do you want to add on to your story that followed Craig? Sorry.
Perhaps maybe in posing a question, do we feel that equality has maintained its current status or state, or I believe I heard somebody say that they felt that equality had gone backwards over the last year. And I just wanted to sort of explore that a little bit.
I think if I'll add a couple of things, equality in society generally for women has gone backwards because most of the industries that were most heavily affected by lockdowns were the high contact industries, and like hospitality, retail, and women more represented at the front line in those industries. So generally across the world, the numbers show that women have gone backwards in terms of if more women lost their jobs than men, and more women lost hours or ability to earn than men. So that's just a global trend. A lot of it's industry related. I mean, if we happen to be hit by a different type of crisis, then maybe it wouldn't have affected women so much, but it did. And then because lockdowns meant going into the home, and the home is often considered the domain of the mothers or the women, in many households, they just reverted to patterns that it augmented patterns that were already held by a lot of households. The children were being homeschooled by the mothers, generally, maybe helped by the father. Managing visiting vulnerable friends, elderly, managing the shopping that one day that if we're in Melbourne, the one time or day we could go out to shop and so on. Many of those duties were taken on by the women because they were good at it and because many of them had lost their hours. So in general, it meant that women went backwards. More domestic work, less hours, less work, and women were generally less likely to be in the sorts of jobs that could be transferred to remote working. So there was a step backwards for women. It wasn't all bad, of course, but just so happens that some of those numbers were greater than men. One of the good things with Zoom is that when you are speaking, and Teams, when you're speaking, as I am now, my screen gets lit up. Now, generally in a boardroom, that doesn't happen. A light doesn't go on when a woman wants to speak. And when men speak, generally because they're more likely to be listened to, as Louise said, because they tend to have more volume, because they tend to be more physically in the room. Women also will often stop. They'll retreat if another person interrupts, and that's women and men, but men will see that as an invitation to continue rather than an opportunity to invite the woman to continue speaking.
Absolutely. Isabel, one of the things that I've actually felt as well, and I'm not too sure if this has been your experience as well, that do you feel that the gender gap is perhaps more prevalent in some cultures than others?
The evidence says yes, cultures, industries, age groups. So if you're an older woman, you've got more things starting to count against you. You've got, so yes, there will be more disparities in different, not just genders, but different areas. Yeah.
Doing a lot of internet on that topic, doing a lot of international work, 2/3 of my team in India. What we have inside the company is like what you would think is idealish, left-leaning Western values as the DNA of the company, which in India is quite a challenge for some of the younger men, right? They get caught off guard. And so I think, whatever, right? That's just the way it is, right? But then it becomes the standards that we hold ourselves to, and everyone quickly adapts. And we're far from perfect, but we're probably a level above what people are hoping for and expecting from their working experience in India. Today, we're in the process of trying to hire a group leader of stuff, and we talked to some of the constituents about it. And the young women on the team, their thing was like, well, for me, the most important thing you could do is hire a woman into this role because we need more women in leadership, because Everest at the moment has none, right? It's just got 2 founders who are both blokes. I'll shut up on that point.
No, that's a really great point, Craig. Over the years, we've actually witnessed a lot of positive change, in the organizational culture worldwide in the last decade or so for women and working mothers, But I still feel that there is always room for improvement. What I would love to hear from you all is what are some of the improvements can we make to allow female leaders thrive?
If I I find that we hear a lot of, what you need? More confidence. What you need to be more authentic. What you need. And people walk out going, oh, I need to be more confident. Where do you buy that? You don't. It's not actionable feedback. So I think it goes right back to base skills. And one of the skills I find these days that I'm teaching all the time is how to interrupt. And that means a really clever technique of breath, using breath. So as someone else is speaking, I call it the Batten Technique. It's like you're trying to get the baton. As someone's running at you with the baton, you start running as well, which means you start going, right, okay, yeah, right, oh, fascinating, yeah. And then when they breathe, bang, you grab the baton. But when you get the baton, you have to run. You don't just stand there and go, I got the baton. No, you have to run when you get the baton. And these are really solid skills that you can practice, and also how to give feedback when things aren't working. And sometimes you can get clever, because it might not be that I even do that feedback. It might be that I have a symbol with my pen against my nose, and that says to Coquille that I've just been interrupted and I want to get in which case Coquille will say, oh, excuse me, Harshita, I think Louise hadn't finished. And then I go, oh, thanks, Coquille. Yes, as I was saying. Now, this is working smarter, not harder. It's solid techniques that actually work in real life. And also being able to go with a comment, not constantly fight, but go, great idea. And what you're saying is this. Another perspective would be, we're not very good at that. We're not very good at those things. So, so my answer in short is, how do we do it? Solid skills, no more, you need confidence, you need to be stronger, you need to be this. It's pointless.
Can I jump in? I'm conscious that I talk too much, so I ask permission first.
But we love you.
Then I don't wait for an answer, by the way, Louise.
Go for it, Craig. I know Jason was also applauding Louise, so go for it, Craig.
But on top of the building techniques, which I think is awesome, and I'm loving hearing them, there's a role for men to play, and there's an engagement with that as well. And so, like, for years, I used to wonder about what's my part to play in the fight for gender equality in organizations, right? And I'm like, maybe I should just stand back and get out of the way, right? And over time, I kind of learned that's not the right thing to do.
Right.
But for a long time, I thought it was the right, like, give people the space to have their voice, but it doesn't quite work like that. You need to enable people through action, I think. And so there's two pieces of advice for everyone, I think I've got, which is like, women, for the men that were ignorant, like I have been, invite them to participate, right? And invite them to engage in the conversation and to be supportive and stuff like that. And men, the other one is, it's kind of more micro level than the meta participate in the conversation. It's more like in conversations and in meetings and stuff like that. Be aware that there are people that have got value to add to the conversation that don't volunteer it, and invite them to participate. When we run last conference, we typically get 40, 42, 43% women speakers at the event, right? It's a tech industry event. It fucking takes heaps of work to get women to turn up and be speakers. And that 43%, 2 of them volunteered, right? The others all had to be hunted down and asked to participate, right? Makes for a better outcome, puts a bit of more work on my shoulders, right? But it's the right thing to do, and it gets, it's good for everyone that we invite people to participate. And one last point before I put myself on mute for the rest of this meeting is, a lot of the times, including in this conversation, a lot of the times I hear us talk about there's good and bad. And yeah, Louise, come and speak at last conference. That's an excellent idea. When we go back to live conferences, I'll call you. But a lot of the time when we talk about this stuff, there's good and there's bad, and it feels black and white, right? And this is a general principle that I have to everything in work and life, is don't aim for good, aim for one small step better, right? And if you just take a better step today, then next week will be 7 steps better, right? And then do that again and do that again and do that again, right? And I think that unlocks us from kind of being frozen. It's all too hard. I don't know what to do. Instead, I can just go, in this conversation, I'll say my piece and I'll go on mute and let everyone else speak. And that's a small step towards better.
Wonderful. That's great advice. Thank you, Craig. Jason, would you like to share yours?
Well, simply I was applauding Louise's technique of the pen on the nose, which I thought was really cool. And regardless of who you are, there are ways that as a group of people coming together, you can leverage that and collaborate on ensuring that everyone has a voice. that's somewhat internally driven, but I guess some of the other facilitation type techniques that that you can adopt is, if as a facilitator, you identify that there are dominating people in the room, and it doesn't really matter who they are. It's they could be the squeakiest floorboard in the room and getting the airtime. And I guess through facilitation techniques, you can acknowledge their contribution to help the conversation move forward, and identify that there might be quieter people in the room that, through personality type, perhaps maybe are a little bit more private or introverted or whatever the case might be, and find a way to lift them up and give them an opportunity to shine as well. And so I guess if you've ever got the opportunity to facilitate, look for those body language cues that somebody's got, whether it's, I need to go to the toilet, I've got something to say, or, it might be a slight shoulder dip or something like that. You look for that sort of body language and see that, potentially potentially people have got something valuable that they want to contribute but aren't given the platform.
It's all kind of obvious, Jason, isn't it? It's like wake up, Australia, wake up. Just listen. Some people want to talk.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great points, Craig. Jason. And Isabel, what are your views on how we can improve going forward and ensure that female leaders are given the opportunity that they need to thrive?
Great points about how women interact in rooms where there are other men. So body language is, as Jason says, a really important thing to look out for. So if you watch the room and you see how other people respond to, say, when the usually male leader speaks, and you can tell lots of things. Like, for example, when people are connected to the table, when people engage, they're more likely to be touching the physical object between them, usually the board table. And when they're not, they disengage physically. So there are lots of clues that you can use to create some timing that will help you. So I've got a couple of things that I would suggest. I agree with Louise that you stay away from, women should be careful about the times when they talk about themselves and their sexes in terms of traits. So, I thought I sounded really good, or I thought I sounded really confident, all those things. And even how they bring language into conversation with men, and they should also not say that to men. Oh, that was really great. You looked, you sounded confident. Use actual physical things that people do, so verbs, not adjectives. For example, that volume or that pitch or that timing, things that people can actually take on and master as a skill when they're talking to people in a room. I'd also say in a physical room, women will quite often, if you look at where they sit, they usually sit at the edges. Very few women will enter a room, a boardroom, even when they're the first person in that room, will take the center seat. They'll almost always find a corner. And there is a lot of evidence that says people pick your pecking order based on where you position yourself. So take that center seat, take the bigger chair, expand yourself. As I think Amy Cuddy has a great TED talk on power poses, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that's the answer, but there are things that you can do to help increase your presence. So in a virtual meeting, for example, I always use, which you can't see because it's a bit off camera, but maybe I can hold it up. I always use a proper microphone because it removes things that can detract from my voice, such as echo. The tinniness of computer speakers is not great. So things that you can do to expand yourself a little will make a difference. Just a couple more things that women have a few bad habits. One of them is busyness. They'll often, to make themselves feel engaged, useful, and participatory, will make themselves busy. And often that busyness is around doing things like tidying up, picking up the cups, filling up other people's water. And the courtesy is great, and having that involvement is great, but they often substitute effectiveness and impact with busyness. And whether that's physical busyness or their day, they're always, to not rush around and always be doing something that shows how valuable you are. A lot of contributions that people look for are not based on tasks and little bits and pieces of things that you do to fill up your time. Apologize less. It's not
Exactly.
It's not unusual to hear women say, "I'm sorry to interrupt," but why are you sorry to interrupt? Just say what you have to say, or thank you for that. You've got every right to be there. There should not be an apology, and you shouldn't be grateful. You're just one of the team. So there would be my points.
Amazing point, Isabel. I was actually thinking about that. I've actually noticed, and I've been guilty of doing it myself, apologizing a lot for no reason. And I was actually fortunate enough to work for a male leader who was very supportive, and he actually brought that out in the open for me. Stop apologizing, Quaker. Why are you apologizing? Stop saying sorry. You're not doing anything that's so drastically wrong. Have you ever seen men apologize? And that was a real eye-opener for me. So great point that you've made, Isabel. I think going forward as women, we need to stop apologizing for the wrong reasons, I would say. We've had some great insights and learnings and experiences that we've heard from all our panelists here today. I'm actually going to open the floor to the audience for their questions. We are just sort of mindful that we have covered 40 minutes of our time allocated to our discussion. So anyone would like to ask any burning questions or something that you would like to share, your experience?
There are a few people in the chat.
I had a question, if I can ask my question.
Absolutely, Roma, go for it.
So this came to my mind when Craig was sharing his example of the leave application. When you're working with people with varied cultural backgrounds and experiences, whether it is in Australia or whether it is a distributed team, as a leader, how do you create space or facilitate an environment where every voice is heard?
Was that question for Craig? Oh yes, sorry.
Anyone.
Anyone.
I was just thinking about, look, like a bunch of you guys have kind of interacted with me in different times, and I just get all enthusiastic and talk a lot and blah, blah, blah. So there's a degree of there's a broad context of a supportive environment where you should feel safe and secure, right? And mistakes won't matter. And I'm constantly telling people the mistakes they made don't matter, right? The learning is what matters. Like those of us in the Agile circles will know that's a thing that goes on. Then the other part is we use a video conferencing app called Video Facilitator. A friend of mine designed it, and one of the features it's got in it is it tracks the amount of noise each person on the call makes, not volume, but who's talking the most. And so I'll poke in there. I start to get a hunch that somebody's not talking much, and I'll poke in there and see who's the quietest. And I'll start asking them, what do you think? Or engage them in the conversation through questioning. And the other thing is I'll find people like me that talk too much, and I'll just say, you've had your share now, so just go on mute for the rest of the meeting. Right.
There's an app called Look Who's Talking, isn't there?
I haven't heard of that, but that sounds cool too.
That reminds me of the movie Look Who's Talking. A very funny one indeed. Thank you, Ruma. That was a great question. Any others? I'm just going through our chat.
I have one question. This was actually following up from what Isabel was talking about as well with respect to the biases. You know how there are unconscious biases which people are not even aware of, but people with self-awareness recognize it. So one question would be, for this unconscious biases we just do and people are not aware of, what are the ways we can be more self-aware about it? And second, if we see that happening, is there a good way to provide that feedback in a more subtler and gentler way rather than telling that you're being dashed.
Can I answer that? May I? You know, Chuck, when it comes to getting feedback on our own skills or our own style, we're not very good at it. Like if we recognized it, we would have changed it already. So one of the key ways is to ask others, like ask other people what they think, and to just go out and say, did I talk too much? Was that opinion? So ask others. That's the first thing. Don't take your own advice. And secondly, that's an easy way. And secondly, for giving feedback, I spend my life teaching how to give feedback, is that, you know, to have a technique of process. And the process of feedback is to possibly go in a positive way with someone and say, I loved, you know, the way everyone was there on time and you were there on time for the meeting. I mean, if you're desperate for something, you know, that might be what you say. And then you go, you know, on the other hand, when there were a lot of people there and only maybe one voice was heard, so that's describe the situation, express your feeling. I feel concerned, give a reason for that concern, because I think a lot of people had a lot to say, and then offer an alternative behaviour. So I tell you what, let's use that, look who's talking next time, and just measure that, you know, so we can really all see that, who's talking, and try to get that balance and get everyone's voices heard. So in answer, first of all, don't take your own feedback, ask others. Secondly, there's a process for feedback that works really well and is really well researched. Why recreate the wheel?
Yeah. See, there is an addition to that. Unconscious biases are a very human trait, and we are never going to eliminate them. They keep us sane, because if without them, we would be dealing with data influx that we just couldn't handle. They make us who we are. So we're never going to eliminate unconscious biases. But for those who are in design thinking, you can certainly design for it. We know what a lot of unconscious biases are, and the workplace should be designed with that in mind, so that we don't have, we're not just leaving it up to the skill of the person or the goodwill of that group, or the fact that there might be really a sensitive manager who's very well enlightened. We shouldn't be dependent on how good people are. We should also be making, I mean, as important as it is, of course, but don't leave it to chance that the person there is great. Design for it.
Isabel, I'm really curious. Can you give some example about what kind of design would enable that to happen as a consequence?
Well, for example, a lot of feedback is given in a face-to-face setting, and a lot of consultation is done face-to-face. Some people just are not very good in that environment. Some people need to think about things. Some people need to be able to check in with other people before they give an answer. We all express ourselves in vastly different ways. So if that's the case, and if the topic that you're consulting on is really important, don't just depend on the people who happen to be very good at giving feedback on the spot, in person, face to face. What about everyone else who are not so good? And that includes people who are more introverted, more shy. There are physical reasons why they might not, stutterers, for example, people with physical disabilities, people who have maybe some hearing issues. They have to be a lot more careful, and they need more time, and they need more media and more environments in which they can work to their abilities.
Another idea would be, live, is to shake the room up. So often we go into meetings and we sit in the same chair every time, is to actually say, it's no same chair, it's different chairs, bang, everyone moves around, because you get a different power structure. So that would be a design idea.
Absolutely. I actually had one last question. I'm just looking at the time. I'm not too sure if we have enough time left to ask one last parting question.
Oh, I just got a burning, you know, Shaka, have you ever used any psychodrama? So one thing is not to use the voice, but to say, you know, I love this exercise where you say, okay, at that end of the wall, it's who feels really strongly about this. And at that end of the wall, it's who doesn't care. And in the middle, I don't know, I'm either way. And then you get people to place their body on the line instead of speak. People are so honest when they have to do that. You get incredible feedback.
That's amazing. Thanks, Louise.
Yeah.
You know, I've actually been hearing about COVID fatigue from friends and colleagues. And some actually haven't even complained about COVID laziness. Have you guys come across these, references?
Yeah,
Have you experienced it, or have you sort of come across someone going through that, and how did you sort of help them?
What is it?
Overcome it.
well, I've talked too much, but I'll say COVID fatigue. I know people, consultants, who are getting on Zoom at 7 o'clock in the morning, like you said, Craig, and finishing, late at night. And they've got lights on them. They've got, and it is exhausting on the eyes, and they don't manage it well. So they're doing 60-minute meetings followed by 60-minute meetings. You can't do that. You have to have breaks, and things aren't very well structured. And so people are listening. What are you saying? What are you saying? What am I supposed to do? Where am I? Who am I? So we're badly structured. We communicate badly. We're doing it all day without breaks. And there are people who are on the verge of collapse. Absolutely. COVID fatigue, big way.
Yeah, I agree. I think in a lot of ways it has to be self-managed, but I guess as a leader, you can make people aware of different techniques that can help them balance that. I'm a sucker for collaborating at the inappropriate times of the day, and getting up at 2:30 in the morning to join a call in the US, which I don't need to. I just have a particular interest. So I think when I look at the work day and look at, what we need to do to create a bit of balance, I find my, I was going to say my special place, but that sounds kind of creepy. So yeah, I find, that at certain times of the day, there are certain activities that I will schedule for myself, whether that's to go and water the garden, or I find myself weeding in the afternoons, and, things like that, things that are going to take you away from the room that you're in all the time, and puts you back into nature. I think that's a really important, an important point, to not forget about the things that sort of, you would normally hold dear, but in this remote working environment, we tend to just go from one meeting to another because our calendar says that we've got another meeting coming up.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key, just managing your time. And I guess we tend to forget it, especially when we are in the home environment, because we don't go to work and we come back from work. There is no sort of like a distinction between, now that we've come back from work, this is our family time. Because we've actually brought work home, there is no, that distinction. And I think that's where people really need to be mindful as to, how can they focus on, creating that environment where you don't have the fatigue developed over time, looking after yourself, exercising on a regular basis, going and getting massages, and going out in the nature, for example, with your family. So all of those things are really important. You brought up a really good point, Jason. Thanks. I'm just sort of mindful of the time. We've only got about 4 minutes left. So I guess we can wrap up if everyone is okay to, I know we've had some really interesting and amazing conversations, and I don't want to leave. I wish we had some more time to continue to talk. So,
Okay.
Sorry, yes?
I think Yoganita is trying to get a word in, if you have like a minute.
Oh, sure, certainly. Certainly, Yoganita. Please feel free to share your question. Can you hear us, Yoganita?
Yoganita, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. So actually, I just wanted to share experience because I was the one that I was always talking and I didn't allow people to talk, but like I actually wasn't aware of that. And our agile coach at the Iconic, she actually brought a topic that is called equal voice. And in that conference, I realized about like, oh my God, like I am the one that I am not allowing two people to participate. So then like, and now I was aware of it. And then every time that I was in a meeting, I was like, okay, remember silence, like allow people to speak, and or maybe to help them to kind of say their ideas and not be me the one that always was speaking. So that was really, really good. And that's something that actually you guys can do as well. Like a kind of do like a lunch and learn, or like just a small conference explaining about equal voice, and it was really, really good.
That's amazing, Hanada.
Yeah.
You know, equal voice is something that we tend to forget when we are in the midst of talking. And one of the things that I loved, and I think Louise has also mentioned, that you're actually walking. So good on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
That's great. Thank you, Johanna. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Johannata.
Actually, my name is Joanna.
Sorry?
Joanna.
Oh, Joanna.
My name is Joanna.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But like a Joanita is like a kind of the cute way to say my name.
Right. No, thanks for clarifying, and apologies for mispronouncing your name.
No, no, no. No, it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as I said, we've heard some really great conversations today. I loved, Louise, how to create a brand and being conscious of your backgrounds. Whatever you do not share your toilet view. Yeah, we'll be actually walking away with that today. And some of the great feedbacks that we've actually received on how we can improve, you know, our working environment to allow women leaders thrive. Some of the techniques that we've heard today have been amazing. You know, providing solid feedbacks about, you know, what skills you can actually develop in order for you to become more confident, for example. You know, and how can we sort of provide feedback in a positive way, and how men can support women in their journey, and how we can invite women to participate, you know, and be aware of what value that they're bringing on, and making sure that they have that voice to share, you know. So one of the things that I really enjoyed and resonated with was that as people, we need to be mindful of, you know, everyone's body language. And if as leaders, you're facilitating, or if you're in the room, you know, being mindful of those non-verbal indicators, for example, to identify who are those outspoken people, and also who are those people who are not sort of as outspoken or introverts or quiet, and how can we sort of make a safe environment for them to, you know, share their ideas and share their views, and become part of the team, as opposed to being, you know, isolated. So some of really good points that we've actually heard today. So I really thank all our panelists today for joining us. It's been a pleasure. It's been a treat for all of us to hear from you, your experiences, and the learnings you'll be taking away with us today. Thank you once again. And I'd also like to thank our audiences for being so interactive as well, and paying attention to what, you know, key messages have been coming out from our discussion. So thank you once again. And I've been looking at the chat, you know, view, and we've had such great feedback from everyone. So I do thank once again everybody, audiences as well as the panelists, for joining us today and giving your valuable time.
You're all open. Take a picture before we finish.
As always, we have to, right? Should we do something funny? Should we actually put some filters on? Video filters, or
yeah,
funny faces?
If people on unmuted, yes, Alison, Pooja, if you can come on the video, that would be great. If you'd like to put some filters, fantastic. I know that Jason has started that.
I really want to make sure no toilets are at the back.
No toilets.
All right.
But you will hear someone jumping around, so yeah.
How do I do filters? Somebody coach me.
I've been trying. Oh, there it is. I have a. Okay, what is this?
There you go. There you go.
All right. Say cheese, everyone.
Come
Say
on,
cheese.
Isabel. Oh.
1, 2, 3, cheese.
Cheese. Thank you, Shaq. Oh,
Thank
I now have
you.
to remove my filter. I don't know how to.
One
I'm
more
getting
picture. I got a
distracted.
message. One more picture, please. I got a message in between. My bad. One last picture and cheese. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think I've got the worst filter ever.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
We are going to be opening the floor for some informal chat if you have some time or if you're interested. So we'll be here. Please feel free to continue.